What is happening, guys? Cowboy here, and today we are talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and my experience of roughly 75 hours with the game. Now, I know a lot of y'all have been waiting for this. It's been 4 years since Remake, and in today's review, we're going to cover everything that I've had a chance to experience so far. I want to stress up front, I'm not done the game. I'm very close. I've gotten to the point near the end of the game where essentially the whole world opens up and there's new side quests popping up, and the game's like, hey, go do anything you want before the end. So I probably have another 5 to 10 hours of exploring before I make my way towards the finale. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts because obviously a lot of time spent. So I'm only allowed to show 10 minutes of footage in this review, so I'm going to keep things short and sweet today, and I'll probably do a more proper review after I finish the game. But with all that being said, let's jump in. Of course, big thanks to Square Enix for the review code. So first thing I want to talk about is the transition to open world here. Now, we saw a little bit of that with Remake, but Remake was of course limited to Midgar, and I had a blast playing Remake. I gave it a 5 out of 5, and going through Midgar, I will say there were times where Midgar got kind of tiring. I had a blast with the game. I love the character interactions, the combat, but being in the same locale for so long definitely starts to wear on you, and thankfully that is not the case here. We have a large amount of variety, and in particular, seeing all these places that I got to experience as a kid being modernized and brought to life was really, really cool. You know, Costa del Sol, Gongaga, Cosmo Canyon, just unreal getting to see that in this game compared to what I grew up with. Had an absolute blast with it. One big thing I really liked about the zones is each zone kind of has its own thing going on, like a uniqueness to the Chocobo. There are some similarities between zones in terms of activities. In terms of map activities, there's kind of standard ones, like you have towers you need to hit, there's going to be a Moogle location, there's going to be fiends that you can fight with challenges, there's going to be like a great fiend that pops up somewhere, and every major region is going to have those activities. But besides that, each region will also have some activities that are unique to that region. So I think it's a good split because you have activities that are familiar, but you also have some stuff to mix it up. And point being, I think they did a pretty good job with the open world transition here. The next thing I really want to talk about is the changes to combat. So I had a blast with the combat in Remake, and outright, it's just better here. It is outright better. They have immensely improved it with the addition of the synergy system. And the way this works is characters now have this thing called a folio. It's almost like a character tree, and you just level up different skills, and you can pick up a few passives, and more importantly, synergy skills and synergy abilities. Now, you can just freely use these in combat. They don't cost ATB. Some of them are very simple. Aerith could call over Cloud to block an attack that's coming at her. Tifa could call Cloud to launch her in the air to initiate an aerial combo. If I'm running Aerith and Yuffie, I could do a little enchant on my shuriken and then toss it on out for big damage. And as you fight and you do different ATB abilities, you're also going to build up these little bars, which you can then use to execute synergy abilities. Now, the skills, you can use those at any time. They don't cost anything. You can even spam them if you want. But the synergy abilities are big, heavy-hitting abilities that you execute with your duo. You could almost think of them as like a mini limit break. There's some that are going to boost you up to 3 ATB gauges, some that give you unlimited MP, some will boost your limit level, some will just do a massive amount of stagger and increase your attack power. And the point being that they just add an element into the combat that's super satisfying, and it gives you something to constantly work towards while you're waiting for your limit to build up or your summon to proc or whatever the case is. And that's something that I really enjoyed. It added a new layer into the combat where I was always trying to work towards synergy abilities, and it was a very satisfying combat loop. Honestly, I think that's probably one of the biggest improvements in this game. The combat with the synergy system is just that much more fun compared to Remake. Another big thing that I think needs to be called out here is the sheer volume and variety of mini games that have been created. Now, I talked about how world activities differ a little bit here, and there are some that are samey, but the mini games are what really stands out here. Each zone has different mini games you can do, different activities. There's usually a baseline you need to pass, but like a higher score you can get, which is going to net you different rewards. It could be new weapons, which if you fail, you can just buy them at the shop, of course. But just the sheer amount of mini games this game has added, it's like playing a Yakuza game with the amount of stuff going on, which, to be honest, most of them were pretty good. There were 2 that, off the top of my head, I remember I wasn't that big a fan of, but for the most part, I had a blast playing all of them. Obviously, the Gold Saucer has a ton of games as well. Those were a lot of fun to go through. The biggest one that stood out to me was Queen's Blood, this new card game that they've added in. Very, very fun. I'm big on card games, obviously, and this one's pretty interesting. It's like a board control power type dynamic going on. But I've played a lot of Queen's Blood. I think probably like 5 to 6 hours of my Let's Play is Queen's Blood so far, which that is currently at 82 episodes. And a lot of those are hour-long episodes. This is a incredibly beefy game. Just to talk a little bit about length, I have a friend that's reviewing, and he mentioned he beelined through the story to experience it later on his own, and it took him about 36 hours with minimal side questing. By comparison, I'm doing everything I can find, all the mini games, all the side quests, and I'm currently at 75 hours. Just reached the point where obviously there's a lot opening up, and I probably have another 10 to 15 hours left. So if you're looking to get your money's worth, you're definitely going to get it here. And that's also not including like post-game stuff. That's just the open world stuff that I still have available, and then pushing through the ending. There is a lot of content here. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you're going to have an absolute blast with it. But just be aware, this is not a game you should take lightly. There is a lot to do. Talking a little bit about faults, I actually wrote them down because there weren't many and I wanted to keep track of them. But the first and probably the biggest one is some issues with collision. And I think part of this is just their transition to open world, but there are some goofy collision issues at times where you're running towards a ledge that you should be able to jump up, and your teammate will jump up it, but you won't be able to, and then you like wiggle to the right or left and you'll hop up. And I noticed that quite a lot. I think it's definitely something that they could have made a little more loose in the game. It's especially egregious with the Chocobos. If you're running around real fast with the Chocobo and you hit like the edge of a post or something, your Chocobo's like, bah! And you're like, nope, damn it, go this way. And that's definitely probably the biggest point of frustration with the game. I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it is something I noticed. Besides that, there is an issue with transitional lighting between areas. When you're first going into a cave, everything is super, super dark, and then it lights up like once you're in the cave proper. And the only way to really describe it is it's kind of reminiscent of like, how the human eyes actually function. Like if you're sitting in a movie theater and then you go outside and it's like a flare of light and you're like, oh my God, it's blinding. Or, you turn out the lights and your eyes take a second to adjust. The lighting engine kind of works like that, which is odd. I understand why they did it, but it's a little bit weird and it creates some issues where it's just hard to see at times. Besides that, I didn't really have a lot of issues. There was like one bug during a section with Red 13. That was the only area I'd say I really saw a bug during, some minor pop-in. But for the most part, no real issues on the performance front. I did play on the quality mode. I didn't even bother trying performance mode. I just, I wanted this game to push the graphics as hard as it could. I would suggest trying both, but I think I played Remake on quality as well. And I think, with motion blur and whatnot, like obviously I would love to play this game like 4K, 120 FPS, but it's a console exclusive, so it is what it is. All in all, this is an easy 5 out of 5 for me so far. Given I'm not at the end of the game, I do plan on doing a secondary review once I get through one that is more concise, where I can expand on thoughts. Obviously, trying to fit everything into 10 minutes is fairly limited, so I can't talk about everything I want to. And there's also a lot of things that I don't want to talk about this early because it is pre-release. Obviously, stuff like story spoilers and whatnot. I will say the expansions they're making to the story, and not necessarily changes, but even just the way they're telling the story, I had a blast with it. I would go as far as to say this is the best Final Fantasy game outright. Just seeing how some of the interactions have been expanded upon, how the characters have had their personalities expanded upon. Outright, I mean, there was a part I literally cried during this game. And no, it's not the part that everyone's going to be like, I know what it is, it's at the end. Because I'm not there yet, and I don't even know what happens. But there was a part that made me incredibly emotional throughout the game. And there's very few games that elicit that level of emotion out of me. So it's, it will make you laugh, it will make you cry, as cliche as that sounds. But I had an absolute blast playing this. Obviously, I still have a good bit to go. And I can't wait for y'all to experience this. Like, I would say as of now, this is an easy game of the year contender for 2024. And I know it's a stacked year. I know there's a lot of stuff coming out, but if you played Remake and you were like, this is pretty cool, I wonder what else is happening, you absolutely owe it to yourself to check out this. Even if you hadn't, the game does a pretty good recap at the start. So you, in theory, you could jump into this. You'd obviously be a little bit lost, but this is just a damn solid game. So either way, thanks for coming on by. I'm going to wrap things up here for now. Like I said, got to keep this one short, But I will catch y'all soon with the Let's Play, and then I'll probably do some free room streams at launch as well.
Gotta say, that one felt pretty good.